great stand here, and I see the words ethno-ornithology. Just tell me all about it. I'm absolutely fascinated.
Right, well, yes, our project is called EWA. It's the Ethno-Ornithology World Archive, and the communities we're connecting are communities of people and birds, but more broadly, natural communities and human communities. So why this is important and why we're part of the Connected Communities program is that we know that people are increasingly disconnected from nature in this community, in Britain and in the West more generally, but that wasn't always the case. So if, for example, you look at the recorded folk names, English and Welsh folk names of birds that were documented in the 19th century in this country, you'll find there are thousands of folk names that show that people were really in tune with nature. They had a really close engagement with nature and understood a lot about it.
Is this as simple as we call it a reed warbler, and people are calling it a reed warbler because it's in the reeds and it warbles?
Well, that's right. Well, the reed warbler is a really nice example, actually. So if I just say that ornithologists actually doing ethnography, so studying human culture, in the 19th century, recorded 3,297 English folk names of 78 passerine birds. That's just the perching birds alone. And then there's another 3,000 or so for the non-passerines, ducks, geese, etc. Now, the reed warbler is one of 3 species that people sort of traditionally, if you like, didn't distinguish between because they just saw a small brown bird in the reeds, but they coined hundreds of names for them. And the reed warbler itself has a fairly scratchy song, not very exciting, but that...
Not very warbly.
But it's warbling, certainly. Another one of these species is a sedge warbler, which has an even more scratchy song. But then the third species is the Marsh Warbler, which is now very rare in Britain, and it's sort of critically endangered in Britain. But it has an amazing song, and it's a great mimic, and it sings at night. One marsh warbler has been recorded as singing the songs of more than 120 different species when it was back in Worcestershire breeding. But that included a lot of birds that it heard singing in the winter in West Africa, where it was wintering. And in fact, ornithologists first worked out where in Africa they were spending the winter by looking at the birds that it was mimicking when it came back. Now, what's this got to do with the folk knowledge? There's a bunch of names, folk names. Fisherman's nightingale is a great example. It's the only thing that you'd be hearing at night if you were sat there fishing. And another is an English mockingbird. And what's so exciting about a name like English Mockingbird, because Mockingbird doesn't appear in the English folk names anywhere else for any other species. So it's unique to this warbler. To know that a bird is mimicking something else, you needed to know the something else that it was mimicking. So now you picture your man sitting there, probably man, sitting there night fishing, hasn't much to concentrate on, but he's hearing this bird singing in the reeds. And he's saying, oh, wow, it's just done a blue tit. Oh, it's just done a swallow. It's just, right? So actually this one name, English Mockingbird, gives you a connection with whoever it was who coined that name. And you know, we were talking earlier about where do these names come from? Well, they're folk names. They're made up. They're coined by real people. I don't like to say ordinary people because there's no such thing as an ordinary person, but by real people. They're not handed down on the mountain, you know.
But again, presumably, you've got all of these people around the country who are naming things in their local community which might be based on what the bird looks like, which might be different than that the bird looks like depending on the time of year. And is what you're doing trying to bring all of that together so that what everybody understands by this term, like a dictionary, if you will. Is that right?
Yes and no. I would say what ornithologists did in the 19th century was they decided, okay, well, we've all got different names for these birds, but we need a common name. What now we tend to call the standard name, but it was the common name because it doesn't matter what we call it at home, we're all going to use this name in common so we know what we're talking about. Okay, and that's become, as this folk culture has died out in Britain, we're left with a common name, so that's become the standard name. What we want to do by documenting the folk names is firstly recognise the depth of engagement that people historically with connection to our own folk culture, but still today in thousands of communities around the world, in indigenous communities, etc., where people still have their local names. They don't use ornithologist names, they don't use scientific names, they have their own names which are doing exactly the same for them as Fisherman's Nightingale is doing for the Marsh Warbler for the guy in Worcestershire or whatever. And we want to document that to show us all, including those people, to share that knowledge through the internet, to show how much people are still connected with nature, to celebrate that, and to share that and say. So today, when we increasingly find young people can't recognize even a blackbird, and I'm afraid I know this from first-hand experience because I teach on the biology field course at Oxford, and I have a shocking data set of our own students, half of whom can't recognise a blackbird, but who think, well, maybe it's a bit geeky to know the names of things. So, well, you might think it's geeky, but actually you're the oddballs, because in the history of humanity, this disconnection is very recent and very odd.
And so how far have you got with the project?
With the project, so I'll say we're connected. We have a couple of partner organisations, and BirdLife International, and our colleague John Fanshawe over there is from BirdLife International, working in 130 countries with their community empowerment program. So they're very important. We're now, after 6 months of very intensive discussion with user groups, with our own group. There are 10 of us working on the project, either as consultants or full-time, funded by AHRC, myself as director, a web manager, an ethnobiologist, an ornithologist, and another ornithologist, because that's my background as well, and a linguist, Karen Park. Working with the IT development team at Oxford, who are developing the website, and they are now writing code and making this a reality. There is now, as of 3 weeks ago, there is now a file called ewa.sql. So ewa actually exists as a database and now we grow from there. So, but it's been a huge effort of bringing all these interests and experience together to produce something that will work for all the communities who need to use this, communities of researchers and scholars, as well as people on the internet, as well as people in local communities. If I can just give you one example of a starting point for working with the IT people. So they sent us away after our first meeting and said, we'd like you to come up with a few user stories. So just very, very short sort of scenarios of how you see different users of EWA might interact with it and what they require from it. And we sort of developed from there. And I think they thought we might come back with 3 or 4. And we came back with 40. And one of the most, because we were asking, our own team, but of course colleagues elsewhere. And one of the most exciting ones for me that I think really captures the spirit of what we're trying to do. The scenario where an illiterate child in an indigenous community, doesn't matter where, South America, India, wherever, wants to access Iwa with the help of a local NGO, might be a conservation NGO, to access the oral history recordings put on there by her grandmother, who she's never met, but was talking about her own connection with nature from when she was a child. And I think that sort of captures the spirit of what we're trying to do.
And I have a great deal of sympathy with that. And the team that are with me, I live on the side of a lake. It's part of a group of 15 lakes. And so we have water birds, land birds, and I sympathize absolutely with the blackbird story.
Yes. Yes.
Andy, thanks very much for your time. It's been great. How can people connect? What's the website? Where is it?
Yes, sorry. Iwa-archive.net. But actually, if they just Google Iwa Oxford, they'll find us. But Iwa-archive.net takes you to the project site, and when it's live, that will then be the full website.
When do you expect it to go live?
Probably somewhere around November.
Okay.
This year.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Bye-bye.